everyone wants to be a jack of all trades, right? But they're a master of none. Maybe that's not true. You're maybe a master, like think critically here of the things that you know really, really, really well. There's probably like one, two, or three things, maybe a half dozen that you're truly considered an expert on and stick to your lane.
Right.
Okay. Know what you're good at. Is it A, B, or C? And then if it's not one of those things, know who you can go to that is a master on that subject. Okay. And then shut up.
Hey, welcome back to Small Business University podcast. My name is Clayton Carmack. I have a guest, Simon Fisher, a guy I've met and known for nearly 10 years. A guy that I met as I need some help in banking and financing and just met him at an event. Again, Simon, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well, Clayton. It's just such a pleasure to be here with the world famous Clayton Carmack,
It,
small business entrepreneur extraordinaire. It's hard to believe it's already been 10 years. Can you believe it?
it is crazy. I love the story of when I met you, and it's just so funny because I was just new to Williston, kind of when it's actually when the Bakken was, it was after that big boom. It was more of a bust, but it was the time for, as an entrepreneur, that's when most businesses start, is usually in a downturn, right? And I remember
Yeah, absolutely.
doing a couple jobs, had some money, and at the time I was banking with a large bank that just wasn't there locally in the Wilson area. And I went up to you and said, "Hey, I saw that you said it said bank on there. I wasn't even sure what bank it was even called at the time." I said, "Hey, I have 150 grand. I don't know what to do with it. Can you help me?" And you just like looked at me. You said, "Yes, I can help you with this." And that's kind of how we started our conversation.
Yeah, that was one of the craziest introductions, we ever had. We met and it was just like, boom, what can you do for me? I was like, okay, well, let's talk. Let me see how I can help you. And it was a fun story to get going for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely, you were definitely there in the very beginning for my previous business, and it was just great, just the relationship you built, and it just wasn't about the banking and finances. As we became friends, it's just really nice for you to look out, to me and my business partner, and go, hey, this is where I can help you, just on a real level. And I think that's really why I've always, been attracted to be like, hey, man, you're just a good guy, and I just want to be your friend. And so I really appreciate the way you come at people and do it in an authentic way.
Oh, thanks, Clayton. I really appreciate that. And it goes both ways, absolutely. So,
Well, good. Well, so the reason for this, again, small business versus just stuff that stuff that you learn over the last 10 years. So you've gone on, you worked for some banking, some financial institutions, right? And now you've kind of gone on your own, right? So what are some really good lessons that you've learned in your career that you would love to be able to talk about or maybe teach other people, maybe some of the pitfalls, to maybe even avoid?
yeah, absolutely. So, before I get going, I told you this ahead of time, but I got to put this little disclaimer in there. So, for your viewers, I am a financial advisor, but I'm not here in a capacity as a financial advisor. I am not offering any product. I'm not selling anything, nor is anything that I am about to speak about financial advice. So, I'm simply here as a friend of Clayton's coming and talking about my experience in the finance world. So, with that, in the finance space, I grew up in a family of bankers. I always knew that I felt at home in a bank. And you think, as a kid, that the bank is going to teach you about money. And to an extent, that may be true depending on the bank that you're involved with. But for the most part, I found that not to be the case. So, uh, that said, my career started as a teller. I moved up through the ranks, had some time in business lending, consumer lending, did some mortgage pre-underwriting at times. And then, my favorite part was working out in Williston, like you already hit on in the business lending capacity when I met you. And what a time it was out there. It was you have a client come across that had been maybe making minimum wage at their job at home somewhere across the United States. They come out to Western North Dakota. They've never made this much money in their entire life, and they kind of want to start over. And you had everyone on whatever stage of life they're in. There were some people that saw this money and they spent all that money and went home with nothing. And there were others that went out there and they wanted to start up and get rocking and rolling. And they lived on as whatever small means they could just to either send as much home as they could or knock down on whatever debt they could when they were out there. And it was just a tremendous experience to meet people. But the biggest thing I learned out there is that everyone has a story. If you get to learn about the individual and listen to their story, you find out what's important to them real quickly, and you can hear and let them tell you what their specific pain points are. And so, as soon as you can identify what those pain points are, you can find out, okay, is there something I can personally do to help you? And I like telling people that I'm not going to know the answer to everything, or to believe, shocker, but I'm not going to know the answer to everything, but at least I'll know someone who probably does. And I can point you to that person so that you can get competent and quality financial advice when it comes to, operating your business. So just listening and trying to have that learning attitude towards anyone you meet, because you can always take something away from anyone you come in contact with.
No, it's awesome. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like either people or their peaks and valleys when they went to Western North Dakota, and it was still, yeah, it was crazy. It's just like the Wild Wild West, right? So,
Oh man.
I mean, whether you just got arrested and you're coming out of jail, or whether you had some financial or even a drug or alcohol abuse problems. I mean, you would have the whole walk of life. People from across the world even would come and start. I mean, so it didn't matter what you did in your past, is what you're willing to do now and in the future. And it was just so
Oh, most definitely.
unique. I never would have thought in a million years that Williston was, I thought it was just like little old white town, just was called like that.
Yep.
I really felt it was so unique and so diverse with everyone across the country. And probably when I was there, I mean, there was way less locals there for sure. There's definitely more
Hmm.
imports there. But regardless of whether you were or not, there were some great people that were local that did fantastically well in the area as
Oh,
well.
certainly.
So,
Yeah, what a crazy time just for your listeners. At this point, I had an individual I came across, and the whole deal is working on the rigs, and rig encompasses a lot of things, but you do 14 off, on, 14 off, or some shift kind of like that. Well, this individual didn't graduate high school. He was, just newly 18, and he worked on a drilling rig. Somehow he nailed a great job there. And he was working his 14 on. And then when he went on his days off, he picked up an alternative shift. And so he just kind of worked all the time and went from one crew to the other. And this individual was 18 years old, making $300,000 without a high school education. I mean, that's what was out there at that time. And it was a really interesting world. It was the best of times, it was
wow.
the worst of times.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's start of a really bad movie maybe. But no, but really it was incredible to see all these things. It was the hard work that you did, the merit that you did would actually lead to something. And that's where, I cut my teeth in and it really did work, even for me, starting a small company, maybe making 600 grand a year to doing just shy of 10 million in 4 years. It was an incredible story to be able to be part of, and all due to just, the area and the people and the opportunity.
Oh, most definitely.
And I'm sure that you probably got to see that on a level, working at banking institutions, just seeing the businesses, seeing the type of people come in. I'm sure you've got some crazy stories there too.
Yeah, well, I would say it was really interesting seeing how different lenders would come into the area and they would lend differently than a local lender would specifically. And I would see a lot of lenders that would give really long terms, which would result in very low payments to the borrower, and the borrower would love that. So they might get, a 30-year amortization on a property that a local bank might only do a 10 or 15-year amortization. And so the reason for that was that the national bank was like, all right, I'll take this risk or whatever. But then the local bank was like, hey, I've already been through a few of these cycles. It's not if, it's when we go through these cycles. And so when you do, and I've been forcing you to pay down all this principal up front, and you're on a 10 or a 15-year am, if I have to modify that loan and go to a 20-year amortization or a 25-year amortization just to keep your business afloat, like I'm actually doing you a favor by making sure that you're putting this principle down, and that when times get tough and it's not just money flowing everywhere, you're able to stay above water compared to some of the other individuals that maybe took out loans from a national lender at that point. So structuring credits was really kind of an art out there. It wasn't so much a one size fits all model. It was knowing how to set up the credits. And so, I mean, Clayton, that was really important to your business as we got going, is just knowing, okay, if you were borrowing money, how are we going to do it in a way that makes sense for you and makes sense for the bank? And what level of risk are you willing to take, essentially?
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting you say that because I know the consumer may get help from a national bank that didn't know that area. But again, knowing that area and seeing that sometimes, what's that saying that the high tides, all ships rise in high tides, doesn't
Yeah,
mean that you
exactly.
were a savvy business owner. You might just got it to the right time. And then once things got tough, were able to run business. And unfortunately, we saw many businesses fail and just go bankrupt. Obviously, once the taps turned off,
Yeah,
right? And that
let
was
me give you
that
one of
was
my
hard to
favorite
see too.
examples. Let me give you one of my favorite examples. So, I'm just going to reference a piece of equipment that I had financed for an individual, and at this point in time, I really stress whenever you're looking at any type of loan, it's not so much getting into debt. Okay. Anyone can get into debt. There's debt out there. You can file bankruptcy and, not long after there's offers of credit out there, because they know it's going to be a while before you can file again. It's just, there's going to be a rate out there for anyone depending on the risk that the lender is taking. So, uh, getting into debt is easy, as we all know. It's
Right.
getting out of debt. And I'm not talking about paying off that debt because, yes, if I have $20,000 in debt, pay off that $20,000 in debt. No, I'm saying if you buy an asset, okay, if you had to go sell that asset, are you able to get out of the debt? Okay, so that goes if you're financing a personal car, if you're financing a piece of equipment, a home, whatever it is, you need to make sure that if you have to cut weight, okay, to manage cash flow, you can get out of that asset. I'm just gonna, without giving any specifics, I had a piece of equipment I financed for an individual, and if the going price for this piece of equipment was $120,000, okay, I was in an equity position at $70,000, or $70,000 is what I ended up financing. It's worth $120,000, but the market was extremely flooded when he had to go get rid of this asset. And so even though he owed $70,000 on it, he bought it 120,000 and it would sell for that all day long. Uh, when things tipped and it went the other way, he had to shed that asset, and let's just say he didn't get near $70,000 for it. And so just always be thinking of, if you ever enter into any financial relationship, all right, if I'm doing this, if things hit the absolute fan, okay, how do I shed that asset and not have that liability on there? And so if you manage that in your own personal life or business life, whatever you're doing, you're going to be all right. And that comes with, whether you're buying a vehicle, a toy, a home, etc. Typically, the longer the term and the higher the rate, you just got to be really, really careful.
Absolutely. I've actually had some time during 2020, in my business when my previous business where, same thing when COVID hit and things slowed down, your assets that you thought were worth something during a boom were worth far less. And so as you're trying to shed these assets to get capital or just get out of a loan, right? It is difficult. And even if it was a oil and bust boom or a whole world economical, downturn, right? Be able to put enough money towards an asset so you can at least be able to sell it for, maybe putting 20-25% down on something like that, it is a big deal. Is it helpful for an owner to get going? I mean, no, but there's other options, and I've talked to clients just recently where, hey, I need to buy this brand new asset. Well, okay, how about this? How about you buy something that's used, get it for a good deal, well, that means I have to rent for maybe a couple months before I can do that. Well, that's okay. It's okay to rent. You don't have any debt on you right now. So if something happened in the business in 3 months, at least you didn't buy $150,000 piece of equipment, and now you're screwed, right? Like how you get rid of that asset. So rent, make some money, do it slow, and people think, well, I don't want to waste my money. It's the other side of the coin, or like the risk side of it, or if something happens when you lose your business or something happens economically, what are you going to do with it? So I continue to tell my clients it's okay to be slow. It's okay to rent and have enough money down 20-25% on any piece of material, or sorry, equipment, if you do have to shed it. It's better for everybody. Your payments are lower when you do that. And in a couple months, maybe you find out maybe that piece of equipment that I bought brand new isn't the one I really needed anyways. Practice with some used equipment. Try to do these things. But again, it's something that, I don't know if it's like a cultural thing, but it's like I have to own, I have to buy brand new. Do you? I think experience will tell a lot of people it's okay to buy used or rent for a while until you need the right piece of equipment and you have the right money for it.
All right, so you want stories for your listeners, right? So I got
I
one for you
love
that's
stories.
man, this is brilliant about how just idiotic I was at the time. But so this is a good one. All right, so I was working at the bank for a time being, and it always been a goal of mine to get my pilot's license. And that was something. I think you know this story, right, Clayton? You know this story.
I do.
Slightly, kind of. Okay, so I wanted to get my pilot's license. All right, and anytime you're looking at touching anything with an airplane, looking at an airplane, I swear it's just going to cost money. So I was like, all right, I can buy a plane and it's $15,000. All right. So if I get the payment over 5 years, I'm paying like $300 a month to buy this plane. Like, that's amazing. So if I rent the plane for 2 hours a month, I'm coming out way far ahead on this. Like, this is a great idea. So I'm thinking all day long, like, there is no way this doesn't make sense for me. And so I even factored in, all right, how many hours a month am I going to be flying? If I'm 10 hours, if I'm going to be 20 hours, I'm going to be so far ahead on this airplane. And so I ended up getting the plane. I was in it for about, I think 16.5 after I, made a small down payment. I'm in it for $15,000. My rate was low and I was otherwise happy. So I get this thing. Not more than owning it for a year, I had to do a complete overhaul in the engine. And I knew it was a possibility that I would have to do this overhaul, but like it came when I least expected it, but I knew what I was getting. So an overhaul in the engine, I mean, we're talking 20 grand, and I had some other ways that I was able to reduce that number. But, so now I went into buying my $15,000 asset, having to refinance it. My payment went up. I had 35,000, almost 38,000 into this airplane. Okay. And if you were flying regularly, the numbers still kind of made sense. But when the market changed, okay, even though I had to put $20,000 into that overhaul on this plane, it was worth about $25,000. But knowing the importance of, all right, so if something happens, I knew the difference between depreciated value and stated value. And so I had on airplanes, it was stated value for the insurance. So if I insured it for $38,000 or $35,000, if it was a total loss, that's what I got paid.
Sure.
And so I wasn't insuring the airplane, I was insuring my investment. And so if my net total that I had into it was 35,000, I think it was just shy of 38,000. I needed to make sure I protected my investment with that amount. And so I was covered. And so I went to try to go sell the airplane. I knew it was worth $25,000, and I was getting no hits on it. It was sitting at an airplane dealer, and a freak hailstorm came through, believe it or not. And ironically, my now wife, okay, she was tailgating across the street from where this airplane was parked, and her car was up there, and she got hit with this same hailstorm. And little did we know at this time, but that
Interesting.
hailstorm put enough of a depression in a bunch of spots all around the plane that they totaled out the plane. But I was able to recover entirely and get my investment back because I had it insured properly. But that's where, even though I had all the experience of working at the bank, I really didn't fully think through my plan. But I also understand some people have to have some fun with life. You can't just, save every penny you have. You got to be able to enjoy some of it too. But man,
What a
I
lucky
was,
break. What a lucky break.
gosh,
You know what I
my,
mean?
one of the loan officers there, he's like, Fisher, how do you do this? You were in up to your neck on this thing, and somehow you, of all people, come out smelling like a rose. Like, how is this possible? So, I learned a lot about airplane financing. I did some airplane financing when I was out there, and it's a unique thing.
So when are you gonna buy your next airplane?
I'm not saying never, but maybe in about 10 years.
Right. And I know there's even more comes to it, where you're gonna keep it and storing and all these different prices that go with it too. So I know that, it's even worse than owning a boat, right?
So for your
it's
viewers, just
crazy.
imagine this guy. I was very overweight then, and I was so cheap. This thing had an STC, which is a thing that allows me to put regular auto gas in there as long as it had no ethanol. So I had my 5-gallon gas tanks. I'd fill up at the gas station across the street and go in with this big ladder and go up to my plane and dump this gas in the top because I could buy the fuel at 3.50 a gallon compared to
The
$7
aviation
for
fuel, right?
yeah, $7,000 or $700 for av gas, 100 low lead. I mean, there are so many things looking back on that. I'm like, what were you thinking? And so here is the moral of the story, right? Anyone can think themselves into anything. Okay, you can think yourself into something if your own internal bias wants it. And so my internal bias was that I wanted this airplane because I wanted the experience of doing it. I had the income to pay my $300 a month. And so I thought myself into this. And really, it wasn't that great of an idea. So make sure you're watching your own biases, that you're not, just finding a way for your to talk yourself into it. And
I think that's
that,
a great thing because what I do is I think the best way to navigate through that is really have, two or three really, really close friends that are at your level as well. Not those maybe grade school friends that you had and maybe they don't understand business or numbers very well and you love them to death. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you level up in life and you start being around other guys that are making these investments, ask them for their advice a little bit, and actually be humble enough, one, to take their advice. It's okay not to pull the trigger on something, right? But I
oh
really
yeah.
like to be around a lot of guys, and sometimes I feel like maybe I'm not good enough to be in that room or smart enough, but I have no problem, um, asking for a mentor. And a lot of times there's guys that'll be that way and they'll give me some great advice. But I think a lot of times when I come into those type of instances, like, well, this sounds like a good idea. Well, let me just run it by a couple of my friends
Yeah.
that may be a little older, maybe a little wiser, that have done that before.
So whenever you're talking to someone, I mean, everyone wants to be a jack of all trades, right? But they're a master of none. Maybe that's not true. You're maybe a master, like think critically here of the things that you know really, really, really well. There's probably like one, two, or three things, maybe a half dozen that you're truly considered an expert on and stick to your lane.
Right.
Okay. Know what you're good at. Is it A, B, or C? And then if it's not one of those things, know who you can go to that is a master on that subject. Okay. And then shut up. Okay. You're not there to lift up your ego and show that you know more than them about that subject. Shut up and listen to someone who's done it. It's the old Theodore Roosevelt uh, man in the arena discussion where, the credit goes to the person that was in the arena, that fought the fight, that learned it, that has the success. So if there's someone that's better in a category than you, shut up and learn from them and listen to them. Okay. It is completely, and a lot of business owners get in this category where they don't understand that, they do something really, really well, but they're not going to do every single thing well. So you're going to make your most money on doing the thing that you do well and the problem that you solve and stick to that problem. Find someone else who does the other things better than you if you don't have that specific education or experience, because anyone can have experience here. That's what really
Man, I
matters.
I just love what you said. That is just brilliant because, again, I do think that a lot of times people think vulnerability is not a strength. And I'm here to tell you over and over again in my experience, and even guys that I've talked to that are older, wiser than me, say, you don't know everything, and it's okay to say I don't know. Ask the questions. Ask those questions that you think you might feel like a piece of crap even asking for. Like, I guess I don't know what I'm talking about if I ask this question. Ask it. Ask away. Be vulnerable, and you'll actually learn some things. Right? Those who think they know
Oh, for
everything,
sure.
it's the worst. And I would say there's times early in my career, probably in my 20s and early 30s, where yeah, there's times where I was bullheaded enough and thought I could do it myself, but I learned pretty quickly, and got pretty successful about saying I don't know, but I'll get you the answer.
Oh, yeah. I had the wonderful opportunity of being able to work with my wife, and she is just brilliant. And we were just great together when we had that opportunity to work together. And she taught me something that I think has been one of the best lessons I've ever learned. But she often doesn't give herself enough credit. Where if someone's talking about a subject, okay, she'll know a little bit about that subject, but even if she doesn't, she has the greatest bluff in the world. And she does it both sides, whether she knows about it, okay, or she doesn't know about it. But if someone's trying to explain something to her, she says, "Hey, pretend like I know nothing about this and teach me, just so I can be able to present this to someone else." And wow, that has been such a great tool because instantly you might know enough of the details, but there's other things you need to learn, and you pick up on it when you have someone explain it to you again. And it's that constant learning ability, just to always keep learning and taking uh, that desire for knowledge to anything you do, and that's really helped her be successful. And myself, I thank her for that lesson that she's taught me.
No, and what she's just saying is like, hey, just make it elementary for me right now. Just continue to, and she's kind of saying in a sense, I don't really know, and that's okay, right? Like being vulnerable is a strength, and you can learn by just asking questions. You don't have to know it all or pretend you don't know it. And so that's really smart. I might have to start doing that. Saying those type of questions. Just show me how to do it, like at elementary level. Like tell me
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Yeah. If you pretend I know nothing about this, how would you teach it to me? And, oftentimes you'll learn a lot of stuff that you didn't even realize that you needed to know. And it's an incredibly powerful tool.
No, I like it. I like it a bunch. Well, cool, man. Well, I do appreciate your time, brother. Like I said, it's been awesome to catch up with you, and I really enjoy our friendship part of it, man. Simon, it's been amazing. So the story, just us being kind of young idiots, um, and now we're just wise idiots.
Oh
To
man, you know, I, I don't even know if I want to call it wise. We just have experience, right? And then
experience
hopefully,
idiots,
yeah, if you're
some
willing to
experience idiots.
if you're willing to learn from your own mistakes. But let me tell you this, like one last story in closing.
Great.
You got to understand that, oftentimes, who you are is really the only thing that you have, and trust is your biggest currency that you have. And so if you focus on that, I'm in a relationship now with my business partner, and the very first time I met him, I walked into his office. Okay. I found out that, him and I maybe would hit it off. And then eventually we ended up going to lunch, and I said, look, if we're going to do this and if we're going to be good partners, I got to know that you can trust me and I can trust you. And so I just outlaid to him, everything that he would need to know about me, the good and the bad. Okay. And let me tell you, because I was willing to tell him about the bad in addition to the good, I instantly was able to build a level of credibility with him, and our relationship got off to a right start. And he looked at me and things I didn't even want to share with him. And he goes, Simon, because you did that, um, that's nothing I can't handle, and that isn't anything uh, that you ever have to worry about. And I know that I can trust you. And so the most important currency you have, whether it's not the dollars that you're working with, it's the trust that you can develop with the individual. And so Clayton, I think you and I have developed that currency because we have been foxhole buddies. We've been through it. If something bad happens, I know I can call you. We can talk it out. We can see it through. And we both have the faith that we can fall back on to get through these times. So I love our relationship as well, Clayton, and I just appreciate the ability to be on this podcast here with you today.
Well, thanks, man. Like I said, hopefully, a couple years on the road, we'll get you back on here. We'll see what else we've learned and some other new crazy stories that we haven't told each other quite yet.
No, I
Um,
can't wait.
but I enjoy it. So thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it, brother.
Of course, Clayton.